Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Voices of Change. Today, we're going to be focusing on our three-part series, Roots of Resilience. Episode one is going to be titled Surviving Isn't Thriving. And here, we're going to dive and delve into understanding trauma and survival mode. You're here with Gabe and your co host, Tex Boy.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tex Bowie, and I am the host of Voices of Change alongside the illustrious and ultimate champion of the world, Gabriel Martinez here. And today we are launching the first episode of the Roots of Resilience. So, as he said, we'll have just a conversation and delve deep into kind of just talking about our experiences and resonating it to different things in our world in our circles. So yeah, that's what we're gonna be doing. So Gabe, back to you, man. Kind of lead us off on this conversation for today.
Absolutely. And so I appreciate it. One thing I will say is we are really grateful for everybody tuning in with us today. And I will say this first episode, it gets personal, it gets deep. It's about, a lot of the things that we experience personally in our lives that we don't necessarily want to talk about. And sometimes the things that we deal with, sometimes the traumas that we go through and what have you, they're right in plain sight, right? But it's something that we have to live with. And we live with that by being in survival mode. And so moving forward, we want to make sure that what we're giving to you guys is real, authentic, and that it's something that's actionable that you guys can learn from, take, and put into action potentially in your day-to-day actions.
That is extremely true. That quiet hyper awareness, not rest, not peace, just making it to the next day. For some of us, and it starts at a young age. It becomes like second nature, like breathing. But there's this thing, where surviving isn't the same as just living. So we're gonna be trying to unpack that today. We're gonna start off with the first segment for today. What is survival mode, right? Let's break it down. I'll let Gabe break it down first before we get into this. Like, what is survival mode, man?
Right, yeah. So survival mode, well, there's the politically correct definition, but then there's also the definition that I would say like those that actually experience it go through. So, the politically correct one is survival mode is a psychological and physiological state of mind and body. It enters you when you perceive that you're under threat, either physically, emotionally, or mentally. It's your system's way of protecting you. Think of it like a switch that gets flipped when life feels overwhelming, unsafe, or out of control. However, to me, survival mode is literally just living in your environment, right? And rising to the top. So many times in our lives that we were put in positions that may be unfavorable, right? Or in comparison to our peers or counterparts, maybe some unlivable circumstances or just regular day to day to us. Being in that survival mode, right? Whether it's looking over your shoulder, whether it's being hyper vigilant, keeping a tunnel vision on your goals and what you have to do, or that emotional numbness. It all stems for to push you forward into continue living, to continue going. Because for a lot of people, that may be a fight or flight, situation and that situation, may just be their day to day, their average experience throughout life. So, I mean, like I said, there's the logical explanation, the politically correct one, but then there's also the day to day explanation of those that have dealt with survival mode or being in survival mode and finally have made a way to and work themselves out of that.
Yeah, that's a great breakdown. And yeah, we're not experts on this. We're just having a conversation on this just to kind of, unpack this thing. And for me, I would say for survival mode, means constantly, scanning every room, always performing, always preparing for disappointment. And going back to the past episode that we just had where we actually talked about hypervigilance, it's like, just always being on alert. Like you are constantly anxious. You don't have that moment of just relaxing. You just like, I just gotta always be on go, which is fine and fair, right? Because it's just based upon kind of the environment that you're in. It's like, I was holding my breath all the time when I was swimming, right? Why are you doing that? Because you're underwater. Because if you breathe underwater, you're gonna suck in water because that's not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to hold your breath to survive, to actually swim. And, even in moments that, you should have felt safe, sometimes you find yourself, just not even knowing what's going on, but your body and your mind automatically just switch into this mode of, I need to feel safe, or I need to feel like I have my own sense of security. And the hardest part, that I did not know is, I thought everyone lived like that. I used to think everyone lived like that until I was exposed to different types of people, to where I realized some people don't live on survival mode. Some people live on relaxed mode all the time, which is fine and fair. And I would like to strive to be that, but it leads to kind of, understanding first kind of the how you're raised, the environment you're in, and especially, as youth of color in the United States, and then also with understanding kind of like history. Survival mode is something that just kind of gets ingrained in you. Sometimes it can become, I would say, inherited, or like just genetical, or generational, to where, if you saw your parents always in survival mode, you're going to also kind of inherit that and just be like, oh, I'm going to be in survival mode as well. If the people around your environment are always in survival mode, you're going to inherit that yourself and just want to continue that. Um, but survival mode isn't a personality trait. I don't think it's a personality trait. Like for me, I definitely I've been on survival mode on certain occasions. I'll talk about a little story about when I had to turn on survival mode, and it was a crazy experience. Um, and I think it's a nervous system response to a world that, didn't give you the safety you deserved, like growing up, or, as you are right now. But once you kind of realize that, you start to show yourself a little bit more compassion, a little bit more empathy. And it's not like you're broken. It just means that you became conditioned like that. But the great thing about becoming conditioned is that you can uncondition and condition yourself again, just like in sports. You conditioning for a marathon is different versus conditioning for a 48-minute basketball game. It's a different type of environment, different type of settings. You got to do it differently. Conditioning for soccer is definitely different conditioning than it is for football. You're constantly doing cardio for soccer. You're probably doing a lot of weightlifting, a lot of hitting to get your body conditioned for that environment. And your body and your mind kind of get into that survival mode. So I don't, sometimes survival mode, it can be looked at in like a negative way, but in essence, it's a way that is technically allowing you to be the best self you can be. But there's certain times when survival mode should not be, activated, I think, right? Like for you, Gabe, how do you ever feel like when you're at work, do you feel like you have to be in survival mode?
All the time, all the time.
Why?
Especially because I'm the only black face that's in management. It's all the time. I always feel like everybody's eyes are on me, so I have to be on point. I have to be producing. I can't make any misses, right? Because at the end of the day, like I said, that skin color, it's like there's always a target on my back. I just feel I have the innate urge that, okay, I don't even want there to be anything that they can even say for me. So I'm going to overperform. So I'm going to show up early. So I'm going to do all the things right, because don't let me be that, that one person that, or not even the one person, but don't let me be one of the many, right, that are performing or acting in a certain way, and I'll be the one that's used as a scapegoat. So I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy to think, right? So like I also think too, not even at the workplace, but also like, just in life, right? I used to think I was just like chill or calm, you know what I'm saying? And but the truth is, at the end of the day, right? Being performative, doing your job, going home, right? It's at the end of the day, you're shut down. It's like a lack of trust or a lack of like disconnect. Um, and in that time, moving forward, where you do feel like, okay, you're in alone, or you might be feel like you're in a panic, or any of those things. Like, I think that my body knows the truth before my mind did, and so you react accordingly. Like, nobody has told me at my workplace. Nobody's told me specifically like, oh, you need to be watching. Hey, man, you need to make sure that you're staying on top of what you're doing. Blah 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 blah. Like nobody's telling me that. I'm making sure I'm doing it myself. Just because you see the parameters and environment that you're in, and your mind is already telling you, like, you've been in a place like this before. You've been in a similar situation, and your body just immediately adapts to it. And so, I mean, that's my one little piece right there. And I'm sure that others have dealt with that as well, not only in the workplace but in life. Maybe your friend groups, your circles, your community events, anything and everything in between. Because what like you said, the social condition that you have had that isn't the end all be all though. It isn't the truth. It isn't the way to for you to continue to move forward in this life. There are different avenues that you can take that can make sure that you're setting yourself up not only for the environments that you have been in, but for future environments that you have yet to see. You said and I really like how you said like some people are in relax mode, and I really find that so funny because I'm like I feel like I can never really relax. I feel like I'm always on go or always have something to do. And every time I do get a chance to relax, like even now, like we were talking about earlier, like you get a chance to chill. There's like six different things going on in my head right now, where it's like, okay, I may look like I'm chilling, but I'm worrying about like the eight other things and tasks that I have to take care of. It's just it adds up. It adds up, and that is another part of dealing with that trauma. Yes, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Yeah, that's actually a great way segue to kind of what we're kind of unpack next. For me, I don't think in a workplace I've ever felt like survival mode, but I've always felt the need to always be at my best because I just don't want to I don't want to fail, and of course not wanting to fail is gonna create this condition in me to I'm always gonna put my best foot forward, and if I don't succeed, hey, look, I tried. I can find a new way to do it next, and keep it pushing because it's not my life, it's just my job. But I have definitely been in survival mode in certain situations. um I do want to talk about. I don't think I should talk about experience right now, but yeah, nah, it's
Yeah, 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 probably not, probably not.
probably not. But it does this. I would say that there's been certain moments in my life where survival mode has definitely had to kick in instantly without even realizing that it kicked in. I'll give an example. In America, they say police are this, and that. And that conditioning I've had is definitely made me have an automatic conditioned response to any time I interact with police. So it's kind of like automatically I see a police and talking to them, I'm in survival mode. I'm like, whatever I gotta do to get out of this situation, I'm gonna do that. But sometimes you just can't. And it just, it makes you it increases your survival mode in a whole different environment. Um Now, kind of transitioning to this whole thing, the toll of trauma, right? Trauma rewrites how you see the world. And, you know, especially as a young black man, we're taught from day one be strong, be quiet, be composed. So we bottle it all up, but the pressure builds. And when we don't talk about it, it doesn't disappear and it turns out into burnout, depression, anger, and disconnection. And I also want to say this from a perspective of like, I wasn't raised in America. I was also raised in Africa. So my experience is kind of twofold to where seeing life from a different culture versus life in another culture has definitely opened my eyes into terms of how I unpack my own trauma as well as how it relates to my own ability for survival mode. So I've kind of had a nuanced and I would say greatly fortunate experience to where I can speak multiple languages. I don't have, whenever I walk into rooms, I don't ever feel like I don't have anything to offer, right? I have experience in seeing other different things in the world, so I don't feel like I'm just, a dum dum or whatever it is. Because I would say this, I definitely have had some people who I knew as a kid, and they're just thinking now, since I've lived in America, they're like, damn, bro, it's like you became dumb and you became ignorant. I'm like, well, I mean, I don't think all Americans are dumb, but I do see a high percentage of ignorance when I would say about people in America, which is something that can be addressed. I mean, it's because of how people are conditioned, right? But what I was saying is like trauma does
Yeah.
rewrite. What's up?
What were you trying to say? Yeah, yeah.
I'm saying though, it's like, okay. I'll be straight up honest with this. To the world, it seems like a lot of Americans sometimes are just shut off to understanding what's going on in the context of the world. They only care about what's going on in their country, and they feel like they're the superpower. Which I'm American myself, which I agree. Yes, it's a superpower country. It's a super kind of power culture. But at the same time, there's a lot of other things going on in the world in Europe, Africa, Asia, Latin America. There's a whole bunch of things going on in the world. And it's not only the microcosm of just whatever is happening in the so-called Western culture. So I would say there was a part of my teenagehood where I definitely did feel dumber and stupid and ignorant compared to my counterparts in other parts of the world because they're aware. They have that sense of knowledge. They have that sense of wanting to know more history. They don't want to just always play the victim, right? And that's another thing that I would say, which adds on to people's trauma, is playing that victim role, right? Because trauma rewrites how you see the world and it changes your body before it changes your belief. And when you're black or brown, especially a young man, you're taught that vulnerability is a liability, which is completely false. I don't think that is false. So you stop kind of checking in with yourself. You stop asking what you need. You trade authenticity for armor. You want to be like, I'm just going to shield myself and put myself in a cocoon and I don't really care what anybody else says. It's kind of more, you're shutting yourself off from the world, but that armor kind of gets heavy over time. And I remember carrying so much pain under a calm surface just for myself when it came to just certain things, just when it comes to exposure and being in different places, until it spilled out in ways I didn't expect. It takes you down different paths that you don't see yourself going down to. For example, this might be going off on a tangent. You like real estate, right?
Sure do.
So as a guy who like real estate, right, you want to invest in an area that's nice, that's going to give you appreciation of your property, and you're going to get equity and all the great returns. But there's certain neighborhoods you probably won't want to invest in because of the way those layouts are, right? You're going to find, as they call the hood, there's more liquor stores than there are grocery stores, right? Which is a fact, right? For people who are growing up in those areas, they're going to be conditioned to most likely want to go to the liquor store more often than go to the grocery store. With that conditioning in them, it's going to make them now go down paths of different things like drinking, taking drugs, wanting to be drug dealers, want to do other things because they don't have the exposure and the elements around the environment to condition them to see other things outside the world, right? And it brings it's a silence that has not been realized or never actually been opened up to seeing, what if I just go to a different neighborhood and see what's going on there? Maybe it might open my mind to a different way of living versus me just being stuck in this one specific area. And I'll say like this, one of the biggest things in my life that I've always been so shocked and amazed about is the fear of people getting a passport. I never heard of anywhere else in the world I've been.
Don't lie. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense, bro. Like, why would you not want to get a passport and get the opportunity? Of course, it does have some financial to it, but if you get the chance to go see the world and expand and kind of step out your zone, I feel like that allows you to kind of unpack some of those conditions that you might have, right?
I'll tell you that first trip that I ever took outside of the country. This is a tangent, but the first trip I ever took outside the country was eye opening. Oh my goodness. It changed my entire perspective. But it
Where'd you
also,
go? Where'd you go?
I went to Mexico. Went to
Where'd you go to Mexico?
Cancun with yours truly. And man,
Oh,
oh
those are. Oh yeah, I remember.
yeah, random trip, random
That
trip.
was a random trip.
But I'll tell you, right? We're talking about okay, survival mode, and then suffering in silence. Dealing with the traumas. How it adds up. It's not just emotional, but it's also physical. Changing your environment, seeing a different world, right? Not being scared to get the passport. Look at what we're doing now. Boom, we get to Cancun, and I immediately get inspired. I immediately start asking questions. I'm with the locals. We're with the people. We're seeing how people are living out here, and I'm like, okay, we got it made in America. But it's also like, why aren't we taking advantage? Why aren't we hustling like they're doing out here? Day in, day out, everybody that I saw was hustling on the move, making money, trying to get something to go, make it shake. If we're not doing that, wait, what are we doing? But it's also, as well, that they fall subject to their own environment as well. That might be what they have to do to survive. And that might be their survival mode. But taking yourself out of the midst of your environment, putting yourself into another, not only does it let you grow, but it gives you an entire perspective of what others are going through in the entire world as well, internationally, nationally, whatever it may be, right? I would say that experience in itself led me to not only like change my perspective, but also like see, like we're saying, like climbing out of that survival mode and adjusting it in a way. Now I don't see survival mode really as a problem. I see it as a superpower because you're gifted with all the different traits, all the different tools, everything that's necessary for you to move forward and traverse and get through these, these I would say like the ebbs and flows and the webs, the trenches, whatever it may be. You're able to get through it. You're able to, keep moving forward. And when you change your environment, of course you adapt, but you can use those tools that you had learned, right? I mean, of course you can learn from them. You don't have It doesn't have to stay with you though. You don't have to. It doesn't have to always be like that. And use those tools that you did learn, right? Adjust it to where you're moving, whether maybe in a relaxed area, whether maybe Mexico. Mr. International over here, Tex, he'd been to like 30 different countries. So hey,
Hey, don't toot my horse that high down. Like, damn, don't toot my horse that high.
I might be
we got
tooting a little, but
we got more to explore though. We got more to explore.
exactly, much more to explore and much more experience to have, right? But circling back, right, to where we're at, we're talking about the toll of trauma. That toll of trauma, right? Like we said, it's not just emotional, it's not just physical, it's not just spiritual, but it's all three. Your body holds on to it tight. I remember I got a friend, an individual, like, they've been in a lot of different, traumatic situations, and their body is just always completely tight. Like their shoulders don't ever move. He's just like this. Just stone cold Bobby. Your body really holds on to all that stuff. Your nervous system adjusts to it. You become wired for the danger, even when you're safe. Even if you may be safe, you lived in an area where gunshots are happening every night. You go to a spot where it's quiet and you're expecting gunshots. It's like, oh, there ain't no gunshots. Oh, it's crazy. Like it's white noise. It's like you get exhausted, anxious, numb, and the world doesn't give you the space to process it, right? And here voices of change. Especially for like you were saying, Tex, for the young black men that we are, and everything that we go through, right? Uh, People try to push to the side, with our feelings, our emotions, what we go through, right? We're like you were saying, we're taught from young boys, but it's also a piece of being a black man where we should glorify that, right? We call it or should we say we do glorify it, but we call this thing like the grind. We call this the survival mode. It's a mask that we put on. Something that we forget, but we're made more than for just pushing through. You know what I'm saying? We're made more for just getting through. We're supposed to be elevating. At one point we were once kings, niggas. Negus. Yes, yes.
N E
E
G
G-U-S.
U S.
Yes, sir. What
Yes.
niggas? Black emperor, king ruler. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And so, like, how are we going to get there? What are the steps to get there? Well, first, it's realizing, but then also, taking the necessary actions to work through it and get to where you want to be. And
That's true, man.
pass that off
That
to you. I'm sorry, I don't know if
that
you're talking
nah
to you.
nah, that's facts, bro. You know, you really just hitting the nail there, and I would definitely say to that whole kind of survival on the loop. Definitely for me, when I first was exposed to a different country, which is the United States, I was definitely on survival mode because damn, I never knew that I was an African booty scratcher or a kunta kente, and I never knew I never knew all those things existed until those things were said to me. So automatically, I just was like gonna armor myself to kind of protect who I was. But over time, they call it assimilation, which is like, sometimes it can be negative, but you can turn it into a positive way to where you just learn the environment that you're in and make it the best that you can for yourself. And when we never pause to ask what we really need, we forget what it feels like to be at peace, right? And it kind of transitions to this next final part of our segment today, naming it and kind of just healing it, right?
Yeah, naming
Healing
it.
starts, it starts when we give ourselves permission to feel what what we were once punished or shamed for feeling. So, when I began to speak my truth, and one thing I would say, like when I started realizing, I remember I had this, I used to work at this consulting firm, and it was like my first big boy job, right? Like, it was my first
Okay.
big boy job, And the boss, it was like a small little consulting firm, but it used to transaction a lot of $1 million, and I was one of the focal points of doing like all the transactions and everything. I won't get too much into deep with what we did, but it was an eye-opening experience because I used to be so focused on, doing my job the best I can, making sure I did everything to the T, even better. But until the boss guy came in one day, he was like, "How you doing today, Tex?" I was like, "I'm doing good." He's like, "I see you doing great. Great reports, great quarterly reports. I like the numbers. I'm liking it. Let's keep pushing." But then one thing he said, "But besides that, man, how are you doing though? What's been going on in your life? Any fun things, any good things going on? How's family doing?" Checked in on that. We checked in on that. He told me one thing I will never forget out of that conversation. He told me, as much as anybody can speak about you or can say for you or can advocate for you, you are still the person who controls your narrative. I
Mm.
was so confused when he said that. I'm like, what are you talking about, bro? Like, what do you mean control my narrative? So I started thinking deep into it. I was like, okay, control my narrative. So I kept asking him more questions like, what do you mean control your narrative? What essentially he was trying to tell me is that when you start beginning to speak your truth, even to just yourself, and when I started doing it to myself, I realized how much power I'd given to the silence of myself. I never realized that I am my biggest advocate. I am my biggest narrative controller. For example, when people were applying to colleges, I remember when I was doing this, you had to write a personal statement. You had to speak for yourself and write a personal statement to tell them why you deserve to be in that position. And, our stories are bridges, man. And every time we share, we invite someone else to put down their own weight, even just a little. And that's why we have this platform here as the Voices of Change is, you know, I've learned that resiliency isn't about toughing it out. It's about just learning to kind of rest, to breathe, to ask for help, and to stay, and to even say, I need help, or that still hurts, without apologizing for it. And that shift, you know, from that moment when he told me that, every professional space I've ever been into, I always think about the fact, of course, yes, I have to approach some things by trying to impress the higher ups or whatever, to try to whatever do I'm doing. But also at the same time, I also have to realize my own narrative is the reason I am in that position. And
Mm.
the reason why I'm in that position is because I talked my way to there, or I worked my way to there, or I did actions and things to get myself into there. And I didn't allow the trauma or the experiences that I've had to kind of define and condition me to limit myself to only those specific boxes, you know, and greatly. This is funny. I did not know how this was relevant to that moment when him and speaking. He brought up basketball. He was like, "Do you watch basketball?" I was like, "Yeah, I do." He was like, "MJ or LeBron?" I mean, of course I said LeBron, right? He's an old head, so of course he's gonna say MJ. And I got into it, and I was like, "Listen, I can get deep into this and tell you why LeBron's greater." But at that time, it's probably like around 8 years ago, so maybe I was a little, LeBron had. I don't think he had won his fourth ring by that time, but he brought up this clip for I don't know why he brought this clip up. He was like, "Hey, let me show you something. I didn't even know this man used Instagram or used social media." He's just like, "Hey, look, let me show you something. I wanted to show you this just to motivate you today." He showed me the Kevin Garnett video clip where he says, "Anything is possible," when he won the NBA championship with the Celtics in
Yeah.
2008.
Yeah.
I saw that video and I was like, "Why is he showing me this video?" And I asked him, "Why'd you show me that video?" He said exactly what it said in that video. Anything is possible. Your narrative is yourself, so anything you want to do is limitless. And that shift from that moment I just started expanding on it more. And I feel like for myself, that's where I started finding that sense of kind of naming it and healing it for myself to understand, okay, why am I doing this? Okay, it's because of this. All right, so I'm gonna find a different way now to adjust and understanding how I can heal from that trauma,
Mm.
and get out of that position. And it's worked for me so far, even though I've had my own little downfalls here, somewhere in there. But at the same time, I started naming it and I started healing it.
See, I love the way that you just shared that. I think that that story not only does it put it right into the view of our viewers here, but it gives them a real life perspective of putting a name to it and healing from. Thank you so much for sharing, brother. And one thing I did want to touch base is this: that hey, this podcast is not about pretending. like, hey, we have it all figured out. We really don't. You know, we go with ebbs and flows of life. It's ups and downs. You know, we may know a little bit about nothing or a lot about something, and we're here to just share our story and see what it can do. And one thing we will say is that it's about me too, saying your feelings are valid and your healing matters. We also want you to know that whatever you're carrying, right, that you don't have to carry it alone. You know, resilience starts when we stop pretending and we tell the truth. Share with somebody, show some love to somebody, reach out to someone, talk to somebody, do all those things, right? You know, and shout out to Texas mentor from his previous job, or just say manager, because it sounded like, hey, he spoke to me,
He spoke to me.
he spoke to you, and man, boo. Now my boy is off to the racers. Yes, sir. So we're gonna start our outro here. So if you are listening to this and you may seem or think that you've been living in survival mode, take a breath. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're human. And you deserve the rest. You deserve healing and you deserve joy.
Yeah, and if this conversation hits close to home, I just want you to know it's okay to want more than survival. It's okay to dream of peace. You're not weak for being tired, not alone for feeling stuck. And most of all, you are worthy of the kind of life that allows you to feel safe, seen, and free. And what we're saying might not apply to every environment in the world. There's places in the world where people are going through civil wars and global wars, and for them, it's a whole different approach and different perspective they have to approach with. That's a whole different type of trauma. But there's different ways to us as humans and us as voices of change. We can now partake in that journey for them. So that's not a fantasy. That's the real work of resiliency, and you don't have to walk that road by yourself. So this is episode 1 of the Roots of Resilience. Surviving isn't thriving. And if you really enjoyed this episode, go like, comment, subscribe, and also check us out on the Alive Podcast Network. And be on the lookout for more episodes dropping soon. So
Absolutely.
yes, sir. Any other final words for you, man?
Like we said, man, hey, if you're in survival mode, there is a way out. But don't feel like your story, what you go through, and the things that you've experienced are something to be pushed to a side. Use that as a superpower, as a strength to propel you, push you forward into not only those different environments, those different rooms, and around those different people. Because you never know. Your story might just be the story that changed someone's life.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I'll end it
sir.
on. We are the voices of change. We appreciate you all for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, and you can find us on the Alive Podcast Network. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you guys.
Until then, breathe deep, hold space for yourself, and keep growing. This is Roots of Resilience. We are the voices of change. Peace out.
Whoosh!